Well, happy post-Thanksgiving. Hopefully everybody survived and didn't eat too much. I think I did. Um, it's really the only class video associated with the last week of class, right? Week 7, step 6. Because we've talked about some of this, the idea of step 6, getting and keeping the job. And we've talked little pieces of it, so this is a bit of a review with some new ideas kind of welded into it. And then I'll do a video 17, which is going to be a course review. So there's a set of slides, and then I'll talk through some of it. So that would be a good thing to prep for the final exam. So let's do a little bit of tech time here right off the bat. All right, so what our folder now looks like under lessons. Again, all the previous steps are down toward the bottom if there's something you need out of there or something you want to look up. Um, but we're moving into the really the last week of the course and then into the final. So week 7 looks like pretty much every other week. You've got the textbook chapter. This second piece, these slides for student use, if you want to use them, it's a set of 10 slides it's basically a skeleton set of slides. And what you can do is download these, save them to your computer, and then type in your information. I built it based on a topic of welding. Let's say somebody was going to do a 10-minute presentation on that. Of course, you would switch it to whatever yours is. And again, based on those outlines, the topic outlines I received, the whole point of that worksheet is to give you a jumping off point to start building your presentation. What are you talking about? What are the 3 main points? And then get the supporting points of information and data. So if you're doing it on your career, what is the potential for, what does the job market look like? And you can look local, state, federal. There's 3 subpoints that support it, right? Same thing with pay, local, state, federal. And so use those if you want. You don't have to, but it gives you a starting point. There's a single worksheet, and this one's fairly straightforward. It's a lot like the last few, where you're going to go out and find a definition and kind of write your own definition as to what critical thinking is, why it's important. And the meat of it is the last. It's a question about how do we improve voter turnout in this country. And so I want you to think about that, and don't think inside the box. Think of anyway, it can be very creative. How do we get more people to come out and vote? And is that a good thing, a bad thing? Generally, we say yes, but there may be some downsides to trying to incentivize that. I posted a rubric. It's just kind of here's how the presentation will be graded. So you can see, if you open this and look at it, it's almost all based on the information. It's not so much about formatting. So it's a learning curve, right? But remember, the slides themselves with bullets, but then either maybe a Word document or using speaker's notes, which I kind of wrote up, but let's do that while I'm thinking about it. If you go into PowerPoint, right, typical PowerPoint slide, and on the bottom, I've got it hidden here, but if you pull this up, see where it says click to add notes? So if you're in this view here, you can click on that and type in notes. So this would be what you would say as you were narrating. So we're kind of faking it a little bit in so much as we're not doing this in class, but this would be where you'd put, here's what I would say. Okay, and again, the alternative, you could do a Word document that does the same thing. Slide 1, here's what I'd say. I'd introduce myself and my topic. Slide 2, agenda. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Because I can't, unless you do, and you're allowed to if you want to, do a webcast or record yourself, that's fine. In fact, that's really the preferred method, but I know a lot of people don't have that technology. So I can't make it a universal requirement. Okay, so that's speaker's notes. Where was I? I was in lessons. I think that's it. So here's the video for this, and I will do a short video going through the review slides. So we'll get to that in a minute as to prepping for the final. Where's the final exam? I built it just like the midterm. I put it in its own folder, so you'll see it right under week 7, final exam. There it is. I haven't made it available yet, but I will really kind of early in that week. The class runs until the 8th, but I'll probably open it up, I don't know, December 3rd or 4th to give you guys plenty of time. Specifics I've got in the slides because everyone's always curious to how many questions, but again, much like the midterm, just a little bit longer, but still open book 2 hours to take the final. Okay. All right, anything else in here? Not really. Oh, one of the things, I haven't done it just yet, but I need to add quiz 4, which we just finished up with answers. So again, as far as reviewing, this would be a good place, maybe one 45-minute session, go through the quizzes and tests folder and look through the quizzes and the midterm. They're all in there. You may see a few questions that are, I don't know, identical. There may be a couple, but there'll be similar questions because it's over the big picture topics that we've talked about. So if you understand why the answer is what it is, that's a good way to review. Even if the question gets reworded a little bit, you understand the concept, right? So all that's in lieu or in preparation for the final. So this getting and keeping a job, again, we've kind of talked about this in pieces, at least. So this shouldn't be super long, but just more ideas on it and kind of a refresher, because in a sense, ultimately why you're in school is to move from maybe that paycheck to paycheck job you don't enjoy into something career-like, which is lifelong, more job security, and doing something that at least most of the time you hopefully enjoy. What else on tech time? I think that's it. So let's drive in. Presentations. Okay. One of the things I see sometimes, people submitting these, the easiest way to submit your presentation to me is just send it as an attachment to an email. Now, the one thing that can become problematic is if you use 1,000 pictures. And look, I like pictures in a presentation, absolutely. But if they're really large file sizes, it makes the overall presentation enormous file size wise. And I've seen people have problems sending that through their email because it's just over the limit of what it'll take. So if you see that, take a look at how big that file size is. Let's see if I can do this without flubbing it up. There's a way to, and I don't do it that often. If you go, so you go back to File under PowerPoint, Info. Over here on the properties, again, I know this is small, but you can see the file size. And when you start getting up into giant, 10 gigabyte file sizes, you may have to go in and take out a few pictures. You can actually lower the fidelity of pictures when you click on them and build them so that they're good for transmission in emails, so that they're not enormous. Right? That's one of the things. So send it to me. And if you have problems through the GNTC email, that's why my home email is on the front page of the syllabus. During the course of this semester, a few folks have had to send me worksheets to my Gmail account. That's fine. Don't, just get it to me. That's all I care about, right? And if you have to, ultimately, maybe you have to eliminate a few of those pictures just to make the file size fit. Programs of study. I want to hit that one more time as kind of we're leaving the course, but it goes back to the GNTC homepage, and there's a point behind this, because talking about careers and jobs and what the future holds, remember, under academics, there's programs of study. And we looked at this before, but this is where you could look up all of the programs offered at the school, and it will give you the courses required to get to that diploma, certificate, or degree. So this, in a sense, is a pathway to graduation. Now, there's another place to do that, and it's in my GNTC called DegreeWorks, and that one's a little more vectored toward you and your degree program. But both of those ideas are your pathway to graduation, and it seems like this is a good place to talk about those, because we're finishing up the course and you want to keep your pathway going. I mentioned this, do one more time for the final exam. Class 17 slides and video will focus on a review. So it goes through everything, not everything, most of what we've talked about, and tries to hit the high points. So that would be a good thing to have. Go over that before you take the test. And if it was me taking it, I'd have that file open, because it's an open book test while I'm taking it. I mentioned the quizzes and midterms. Any notes you've taken along the way is a good thing. And do those in a couple, 3 45-minute sessions instead of trying to cram it all in Because again, open book, you think, I just look stuff up. But that eats up time. So if you can answer 60%, 70% of the questions because you know them, because you did some studying, and then you have to go and look up the other 30%, you'll still have plenty of time and you'll probably do really well on the final, all right? And it's a big part of the overall grade, so we don't want to mess that up. All right, a little bit of a review. It kind of comes from previous class videos, and I know everybody takes a week off break and it's like your brain just flushes everything. But one of the concepts in there was this idea of stress and looking at stress, and we looked at life expectancies and that one group of middle and older age white men, me, actually having a decrease in life expectancy because of what the researchers termed deaths of despair. And so, not to get grim, but as you go through school this first semester, I don't know, it depends. If it was the very first one, you were probably pretty motivated, but you've still got another year in front of you, year and a half, who knows? And so there will be some loss of motivation for you guys as well, right? So it's not like you're going to lose all hope, but as you start to lose a little bit of hope, how do I regain that? How do I regain the motivation I had when I started? And part of that is to stay connected to your goals. That top 3 jobs worksheet. Here's what I want to do in my life. Because if you give up on them, you may come back to it, but then you've lost some years in the process, or maybe you don't. And then what? You end up stuck in that dead-end job that you don't like. Okay? So to me, the point of it, reflect on not just that group, but how stress can affect all of us. And our lives are full of it. And just add on to it, not just school, but look at the current environment with COVID. And, heck, this morning I read some new variant in South Africa. It's like we're constantly stressed out, okay? And if you think you're unique, you're not. Everybody goes through this. So persistence makes the difference. But also, I would say, if stress becomes distress, remember that stress curve where a little bit of stress improves performance, and then you go over the top and starts becoming distress, and it can affect you mentally and physically. Let's talk to somebody about it, right? The school has contacts. There's all kinds of them around, local and state-wise, because folks are aware that everybody's dealing with this right now. Maybe if you can get rid of some of the things you're worrying about, that circle of worry, circle of concern, that helps. But maybe that doesn't help enough, right? Don't just focus on the negative. Again, I have to kind of fight that myself. You just look at everything, it's like, oh yeah, negative. Reach out. Don't go down the path of despair. Get some help. There's people out there that's their whole job is to help with that. And some of you may be going into that career as well. Okay, I just wanted to touch on that before we move on. So if you remember this career selection, what do? Do we throw a dart at the dartboard? Do we just follow the money trail? We want to do something, and I was again pleased with the top 3 jobs, as most of the answers had something to do with it's something I want to do, but it's also useful, helpful, does something for our society, which is a good combination if you ask me. Being a teacher, you hope it is at least. Okay, so starting step 6, this idea of getting and keeping a job. If you enjoy what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. And you've heard me say I disagree with this. Not entirely, but it's not all puppies and unicorns. So even if you love your job, and really we should say career, because to me job is something you go to make a paycheck to pay the bills. A career is something you do because you enjoy it and it pays the bills. It's a better combination of those things. Okay? There's still going to be rough days, right? Being a pilot, being a teacher, my 2 careers, yeah, overall was great, but not every day was puppies and unicorns. There were rough days. There were some really rough days. If you watch that leadership in a crisis video. But I do think if you can put your goals out there, and again, hey, look, these worksheets weren't just to keep you busy. They were for you to reflect on things that are important. And so stay focused on those goals. When your motivation gets low, stay focused on, that's why I started this path of going to school, is to get to that goal, to that end point, right? And keep track of how you're doing. Okay? It's not just setting goals, but it's seeing, am I getting there? And these little short-term steps, eventually add up to long-term goals. So, getting through a week, a semester, a year, graduation, you start extending those goals out, and that leads you toward that career path, right? And I kind of talked about this already. Degree works, that programs of study, and using your advisors to help. But again, I would argue go into your advisor with at least a plan of here's what I want to take in the spring, and that registration's still open, as opposed to going in and going, I don't know what to take. Okay, it's your path to graduation, and be a little flexible. So every once in a while, depending on what your degree program is, some courses are only offered in a spring or a fall semester. So be aware of that as well. If you don't see something you need to take, talk to your advisor. Will this be offered in the fall? And you may have to be a little bit flexible on which courses you take. It's not a path. Remember the squiggly line? That's kind of the path to graduation too. You may have to substitute a course here and there because it's only offered so often. Or you hit it and it's full. That's why getting registered early is beneficial, because classes do fill up, especially in the medical fields. On your top 3 jobs, I would say most had kind of a focus: medical, construction, something like that. But some were, 3 completely different top 3, and both of those are okay, right? If you have this vector toward the medical field, there's no right answer to them. Some of you are still searching. So how do I get there? You have to kind of expose yourself to other options. Go out and job shadow. Talk to people in the field. If you're thinking about welding, talk to the instructors. Look at what the job market is, right? Don't just pick it with the dart to the dartboard. Figure out what's out there. And I'll say, welding, look, right now, what's a huge field that's begging for people is truck driving. Getting your CDL opens 1,000 job opportunities. Okay, so keep looking, keep exposing yourself to what's out there. No matter what you pick, and that's why I keep going back to that as far as the presentations. I'd want to know job availability. First, I'd want to know what education is required. What do I need to get my foot in the door? Then the job opportunity, and kind of an idea as to what the pay is. And generally, as we've talked about previously, bigger cities tend to pay better, but the cost of living is also a little bit higher. So arm yourself with that knowledge as you start the path to graduation. Okay. And again, pay is going to vary. As you start out, you're not going to get paid top dollar. But as you progress either upward in leadership or just longer in the career, generally the pay does go up. And remember, an associate's versus a bachelor's versus a master's, the number of jobs gets smaller, but the pay generally gets bigger. So that associate's degree is a good starting point. You saw on that career, when we talked about careers, how many jobs that opened up versus just your plain old high school graduate, which is difficult nowadays, right? Yeah, you're not going to graduate as the CEO, but we all start out as rookies at some point. So just be prepared for that. Remember this? Really, this boils down to passion. Are you good at it? Do you like it? Can you make a living at it? Yes, I'm passionate about French poetry. Great. Can I make a living at it? Or does it just become a hobby? So that's what we boiled it down to. Something you're passionate about. I can't tell you what that is. You have to figure it out. But something you like to do. Something your mind drifts off when you're kind of daydreaming as to something you'd want to do. Right? And are you too focused? That idea of there's an awful lot of jobs in and around the medical profession. So it doesn't have to be just this one. And you can move, maybe you start out CNA wise, but then you either progress LPN, RN, or maybe you decide to go somewhere else in medical, right? Into radiology or ultrasounds, okay? Phlebotomy, something like that. Be willing to work at it. Okay? I don't think anybody's ever going to hand you anything. Work to get there. And if you remember that 10,000 hour rule from Malcolm Gladwell, the book Outliers, that the most successful people work extremely hard and they're very, very organized. Those are 2 keys to success. Okay? And again, this was, what do you want to work with? Head, hands, heart. And the idea was I still like working with my hands, because as I get older, start getting arthritis and getting up and down off the floor to work under the car. The head still works, but the body starts not working quite as well. So just keep that in mind, that maybe you move from the line welder to a traveling welder to running your own business and having younger people out there doing the job for you now. Okay, so something to consider. I mentioned this, and I'm going to give you a couple examples, not that mine are the best. If anybody wants a no-kidding copy of a cover letter, a resume, um, any of those, I'll be happy to send them to you. Just shoot me an email, right? And you saw my professional binder. I'll bring it out again. But this is where, and I recommended you guys start it. Start putting information in here. Letters of recommendation, awards you've received. As you start, build a resume. And remember, as a first semester, if you are a first semester college student, you are currently attending Georgia Northwestern. I would put that on my resume. Even though I don't have my degree yet, I'm in school and I've taken X number of credits. That still differentiates you from just the Joe high school graduate who hasn't done any. Okay, so I would recommend doing that. You can get academic transcripts if you need them. Sometimes jobs will want those. There is a place on the GNTC website. You can get unofficial. They're just kind of a printout. The reason they're unofficial is because anybody could kind of make those up. As you get to the hiring process, very often the job is going to require you send official transcripts, and those come from the school in a sealed envelope with a stamp on it, so that they can't be fudged. But the starting off piece, you may just need an unofficial transcript, and you can get those off of the website and send them to your as part of your application for free. I think that the official ones, they cost like $5, something like that. Okay, I just mentioned that. I'm studying X. I've taken this many classes. So all of these things I would put into my professional binder. And every once in a while, it doesn't have to be daily, weekly, but maybe every quarter, every 6 months, update your resume with those things you've been putting in your professional binder, so it's current and up to date. Because you may stumble onto a job and the application deadline's tomorrow, and if you've got to build a resume from scratch, it's going to come out maybe not as good as if you have one ready to go. Letters of reference, some jobs will require a couple, 3 of those, maybe just names of references that they can contact to say, hey, so-and-so's a good worker. If you see those, pick people. I would pick a variety of, maybe a teacher you've worked with a lot in your major, somebody you've worked with job-wise that can speak to your abilities and your stick-to-itiveness and you're always on time, etc. But you may want to get a couple of those at least lined up, because it's not something you contact me, can I get a letter of reference? Okay, look, one is if you were a good student, I'll say sure, but if you weren't, I'm going to say no. All right, not to be a jerk about it, but I can't just spit those out, because you want to write it toward the specific person. So if you need them, get a head start on those. And then some personal items, I talked about a couple of mine. I've got some letters from students. I've got some student end of course surveys, which just let me go off on a tangent for a second. You guys should have received an email from the school about end of course surveys. I recommend doing them because the school looks at those and tries to change programs, so you can comment on facilities, the website, your advisor, me. Make it professional, but if there's something you think could be done better, by all means, put it in there. Right? And so I have some of those end of course surveys, students talking like, hey, ask hard questions, made us think, stuff like that. And then maybe some contacts and networking. Okay? Some of the people you've run into, I put those in my binder as well. So let me jump out of this. It's not tech time, but I'll just show you a couple examples. This would be a cover letter that I wrote, and the format, to who, what is it, and then kind of a quick, it's sort of a verbal resume talking about you, but not just your, what you've done job-wise, but why you want the job. And I wrote this against this. Now this is a different one. I just happened to pull one up. But if you're applying for a job, pull up the job description, see what it says, and then I would write my both the resume, and I use a bullet type, but you can write, a cover letter type, to what the requirements are. What does this job want? So you want to talk to things that show, hey, I can do this, 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 and this. Don't just, I'm the greatest thing ever. Make it specific. And that's why I use this. When I start applying for a job, I'll pull down the job requirements, look through there and pick out the key words of what it is they want me to do. If I'm not capable of doing it, move on. Don't apply for that job. I have no experience in that area. Excuse me. Okay, and then last. This is my version. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent. There's a lot of templates out there on the internet that you can use, pull down and do it. But here's my resume, and I broke it down just in bullets into my education, my history of employment, leadership abilities, communication, stuff I've done, written and speaking, some of the stuff I've published, some of my computer skills, because that's going to be necessary almost anywhere you go anymore. Some of my, I don't know if you'd call them outside interests, but maybe things like that, professional subscriptions, what I do kind of away from my main job, and then references. And this I put both email and phone number. And it's kind of a cross-section of folks from academia, my time in the military, etc. So it's a little bit long, but this is kind of a combination of what, if you ever heard the term CV, that's more of a narrative. So mine's kind of a combination of. Again, if you want a copy of it, just to use it as an example, by all means, I'll send it. That's part of the process. But let's move on to now what? You saw my style, right? Why I'm applying, what I bring to the table. Everything should really focus on that. Your resume should show that as well, that I have experience in leading people because of this, this, and this. I've been a manager at Home Depot, something like that. Okay? Make these focused on the job requirements. And that's why I showed you that printout of the job requirements. How I've done this, exactly what you guys are looking for, right? And make them talk to that. That's a CV, the curriculum vitae. It's more in the academic realm than, say, just a job in trying to get a job as a nurse. But it shows that publication piece, if you will. That's what kind of makes it different, right? So if you are looking for a job in academia, they may ask for a CV. It's an elaborate resume. And again, there's templates there too. If you get the interview, and we'll come back to that here in just a second, do you send a note afterwards? I've done both. I have and I haven't. I don't know that it makes any difference. A more personal preference. It's a nice touch. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. I hope to hear from you in the future, something like that. That's certainly up to you. It's not a bad thing to do. Right. Here's what I would say. That resume, you put it together first, make sure there's no typos. Triple check it to make sure it's exactly right. And Word helps, but it can miss things. So have somebody else look it over. If you have some kind of whacked out email, look, I don't care what your email is, but I would make a professional email to use on my resume and make sure you check it if you make up a new one. So, I wear panties on my head at gmail.com. Maybe not the best for a resume. Okay. So you get that, you send it in, and the HR person looks at it and goes, degree from Georgia Northwestern. Really what that shows them is two things. You have some knowledge on a topic, certainly, but that you've completed something that, 75% of the people that start at Georgia Northwestern don't finish, so that you can stick out a program, something difficult. That's what it tells them. Yeah, now they look for typos. You know where else they go? They look at Facebook. They look at social media to see what you post, to give them an idea as to who you maybe really are, as opposed to what it says on the paper. So I would clean that up if it's a train wreck of, drunken debauchery. And all of that process now, if you make it through that, gets your foot in the door. And the interview is where you make or break it. Okay? So the resume opens the door just a crack, and now you've got to prove yourself. So be prepared, but it's not a speech. Go in there knowing what you want to talk about, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and be yourself. Okay? Yeah, be early. On time is 10 minutes early, at least. You do not want to be late. And if you get in a car wreck going to the interview, don't leave the house without a contact point in that office so you can call them. Hey, there's a huge wreck on 75. I'm stuck in traffic. I'll be there as soon as I can, as opposed to just being a no-show, right? Clean and well dressed, appropriately dressed. Maybe it doesn't mean you have to be, three-piece suit, but wear something decent, right? Smell good. Um, Recon the company. I've done this myself, as I'll go, not just look them up on the internet, but I'll give you an example. I did an interview. It was Northeast State, and it's up toward Bristol in Tennessee. And so I got up there the night before to make sure I knew where the building and even the office itself, where everything was, so that that next morning at 8 o'clock when I had the interview, I wasn't rushing around trying to find the place, because that adds stress and that makes you not as calm, cool, and collected when you do the interview. Okay, so I would do that, figure out where it is I'm going. Yes, Google Maps can help, but if you're going the first time cold, I would get there 20 minutes early, just to make sure, allow for that little bit of slop. Okay, be professional, be yourself. If they allow it, if they say, usually at the end of an interview, they'll say, do you have any questions? If you have a few to ask, I would have written them down beforehand or during the interview process. I'll take notes and ask. One of the questions that may not come up in the interview is, what's the starting pay? There's nothing wrong with that. I would just couch it in a professional manner. What's the typical pay for this job? Not how much money can you pay me? There's a difference, kind of the same thing. One of the biggest mistakes is just me, talking about you. What you want to do is talk about yourself through the things you've done, working with other people, inspiring other people, right? They're looking at you as, do we want to work with this person? And if it's all about you, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, they're going to, this person's going to be a pain to work with, because all they care about is themselves. So think about that. Yes, the interview is about you, absolutely. But make it like, here's what I've done vis-a-vis inspiring others or leading others or whatever it might be. Because they're looking at you as a potential teammate. Right? Would you want, switch places, think about it. Would you want somebody that's all me? That's all they talk about when you're doing the interview. And then it's a term we used to use after a mission. We come back and do a hot wash. As we had it fresh in our brains, what could we have done better? And so do that. And the more you do interviews, the better you get. Right? So maybe try for some of these jobs. You're like, man, I'm right on the periphery of even being qualified. Give it a shot. If it's something you want to do, the worst I can say is nothing, I guess, or no. But hot wash it. Write down what you were asked, because the questions are very typical. And I've got a page of them. We went over these before, but you'll get the same questions in some form or fashion in every job interview. Right? So write them down. I take my professional binder in there. I set it down. I have a notebook page that's just blank, and that's what I use for the interview. So when they ask for something, show me this or explain this, it's right there. And as they ask me questions, I'll write them down. Give me a tough leadership example that you've dealt with, and how did you solve it? Okay, and so now I know. And then this last one, anything you'd like to add? There may be nothing. Right? There's nothing else to add. But if there's something that didn't get asked, something you were hoping to talk about, go ahead. Just don't make it another 20 minutes about me. Right? And you've seen these before, but this is a good starting point. And again, go through in your head what you're going to talk about. Tell us a little bit about you. I try to start with family and then move into the professional. Just it makes you a little more well-rounded instead of just jumping in and I'm the greatest thing ever. But you can see those are open-ended questions. And again, know what you want to say, but don't try to memorize this as a speech. Because if you start messing it up, it plays with your head. Just be honest and open. And if you've gone through these before you show up there, you'll do much better. Some situational ones. Once upon a time, a lot of my peers that were getting out of the Air Force were trying to get on with, Delta, United, the big airlines. And a couple of the guys said Delta Airlines used an interesting job interview technique. They would try to get you to argue and angry and almost fight with them about something just to see how you would react to stress. like there was an emergency in the cockpit kind of thing. So you never know what you're going to get on a job interview. Okay, those are some good questions to at least have in mind. That last one's kind of that, make you see if I can't get you off the hook. I'm not listening to a woman, right? If you're in there, just to see if you go, whoa. You go, well, hey, I'm qualified, I'm well capable, here's my experience level, and I'll just, as an adult, talk it out and try to come to a conclusion. Not just say, well, I'm your boss, you're going to do it. You may ultimately do that when you're on the job, right? As you think through these, watch yourself and see how easy it is to fall into that me trap. Okay? Talk about inspiring others, helping others, getting others to their goals as well. Because ultimately that's what a leader does. And remember this, that path to that career is never, almost never a straight line. It's going to be that crooked line. And really that's the same toward graduation, that it may be a little bit confused, but if you stick to it, you're going to get to point E, even though you've got to go through some of this craziness in between. Right? Very few people start school and then graduate exactly 2 years later in exactly the degree they started out in. If you do, great, but you're the exception, not the rule. So if you're this bottom line, and that's what I was, you can still get to the finish line. Okay. Told you that was going to be a short one, so that's kind of a good way to finish up. I'm going to change hats, not really. I'm going to look exactly the same in about 2 minutes and start the final exam review video that goes along with the slides. Right, so I will see you in the next video.